Hello, everyone. Happy Friday to you all. We're so excited to see you in the space here. We have a wonderful and exciting event to share with you. My name is Lisa Wymore. I'm the faculty advisor for Berkeley Arts and Design, which is part of the Discovery Initiative here on campus. Berkeley Arts and Design connects and fortifies creative departments and units throughout the Berkeley campus. Funds for these talks are made possible by generous philanthropic donations to Berkeley Arts and Design. Unique to the speaker series is the connection it has to the course Humanities 20, which is offered through the Division of the Arts and Humanities. And welcome, class. I have a few notes for you. A reminder that Creative Careers is taking place Tuesday, March 15th from 5 to 6:30 at Platform. And we shared some information on B-Courses about that. It's going to be a fabulous event. Register by March 18th for that. No, sorry. I made a mistake there. It's on the 15th. I have another event that you need to register for, the talk on March 18th. It's going to be quite crowded in here. It's part of a larger colloquium on critical data futures, and so you need to sign up. We have a link for you that we have shared, and you need to sign up through Eventbrite. I'll remind you about that. Also, hold your cards to the end for your questions, and you can ask your questions during a brief question and answer period at the end. And then turn in your cards to the readers by your last name, the reader who you check in with. So welcome to today's talk, Animation, Frame by Frame Filmmaking. It's presented by the Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive. And there's wonderful showings here in this very theater that you can check out. We'll be sharing links with you about more animated series coming up. Susan Oxtoby, who will be presenting today, has worked at BAMPFA since 2005, where she leads the activities of BAMPFA's Film Exhibition Department, Film Collection Department, and Film Library and Study Center. She's a curator with extensive experience working with international film archives, cinematheques, festivals, distributors, and filmmakers. Her fascination with cinema is rooted in an appreciation of the formal qualities of film as a time-based medium, and one of her great joys is sharing films with audiences, and we're so glad she's doing that with us. Quickly before we begin as well, we recognize that UC Berkeley is located on the territory of Huichin, the ancestral and unceded lands of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone peoples, the successors of the sovereign Verona Band of Alameda County and the Confederated Villages of Lashawn. This event will be recorded, and parts of it will be shared on our YouTube channel coming up, and we will be including captioning for that if you have anyone who would like that service. So without further ado, welcome Susan.
Great, thank you, Lisa. It's a real pleasure to be speaking as part of the A&D lecture series and to be sharing a number of films that we've recently acquired for the Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archives collection. The talk here is related to animation and specifically to frame-by-frame filmmaking. As Lisa just mentioned, this talk does relate to a series that's currently happening, and I'm just going to show you on the BAMPFA website that if you go to On View and check our upcoming or current film series, you'll see the animation series here. And also, this would be the page and where you would be able to read about what's on. Right now, the series is available as a streaming series through March 13th. But the time today, I want to use it in this following way, to really just very quickly lay down the principle of the persistence of vision and the concept behind frame-by-frame filmmaking, and then to get right into the works of two filmmakers who are collaborators, Wendy Tilby and Amanda Forbis, and then we'll conclude with looking at a work by Janie Geiser. So, persistence of vision. This is the principle that makes movies possible. It really is an optical illusion. So a motion picture is really a series of still frames. If you've ever seen a strip of celluloid, I'll just here's an image here on the lower right. It's a strip of static frames, but the way that we perceive motion in cinema has to deal with the persistence of vision and the phi phenomenon. Technically, as the film advances through the projector, it's projecting one frame at a time, but because that frame holds on the retina for longer, and then if you're looking at static images moving quickly at the pace of 24 frames per second, perhaps, there is the illusion of motion. And at 24 frames a second, you don't notice the flicker effect. For example, this is very basic, but we think of old-fashioned marquee signs with blinking lights that look as if they're moving. Well, here, if we let this run for a moment, it gives that sense of, as you look at these circles, you begin to see the white circle moving in fluid motion. Just a very basic example of persistence of vision and how it works experientially on the human eye. Another example of this would be something as simple as this. The more rapidly these two black bars are moving, the more that we begin to see motion between them. I take a moment for us to think about this because the individual frame in cinema is a building block. And when we think about animators and avant-garde filmmakers, they are exploiting this formal concern. And it's really, everything that they do in terms of thinking about time is rooted in frame-to-frame relationships. Of course, all cinema has this as a basis, but really we see it most thoroughly executed in terms of calling attention to frame-by-frame relationships in animation and experimental approaches to filmmaking. So in the case of the artists Wendy Tilby and Amanda Forbis, they're based in Calgary, Alberta. They both came to filmmaking by studying at the Emily College of Art and Design, which is in Vancouver, Canada. And that's where they met. In the case of Wendy Tilby, she was studying writing, drawing, painting, and thought, okay, I'll take a film course. And she was also very interested in documentary filmmaking. Her partner, Amanda Forbis, was studying, well, she was thinking she was going into acting, and she took a film class in her second year, which opened her eyes to how interesting it would be to be an animator and also to be able to have, they both have said that they love having total control over what it is they're making, and that even that animation includes a lot of acting. When you think about story-based animation, there are maybe characters, there may be voices that are created. This afternoon, we're going to look at 3 of their works. Strings from 1991. In fact, Strings was made solely by Wendy Tilby, although they knew each other at the time. When the Day Breaks, which is an award-winning film made in 1999, they collaborated on together. I should say Strings will see examples of painting on glass as the way in which the work was made. When the Day Breaks, they experimented with rotoscoping. And Wildlife is a hand-painted work, but actually they do rely on a computer for part of the basis of that. You can definitely, check out their website, it's there. Let me see. They've made a lot of work. They've also worked in commercial, making animation for commercials. They've done graphic artwork. But I do think that part of the reason I'm so impressed with their work is that they managed to get at the root of sort of tragic ideas in tragic situations, but they do so combining humor and tragedy, sadness. I think they've been very fortunate to be working with the National Film Board of Canada and to have a large degree of freedom in the works that they've made. I think we should look at Strings, and part of what's great about this presentation is I recently interviewed the filmmakers in November. These extended interviews are on our website, but I did want to play a few clips where you can hear from the artists talking about their work. So just let me set up strings for you. This work, again, is from 1991, made by Wendy Tilby. She is painting on glass. So she's painting on an opaque surface. It's illuminated from below. And as we see the movement in the film, she's literally painting out the image that we're looking at and moving her characters through the scenes of the film. I think you'll find it to be both charming, engaging. This is a 10-minute long piece, but when we think about this work, I think you'll see how much Wendy Tilby has put into this animated film. When you're looking at it, just think of the types of themes that she's drawing on and how she weaves together a variety of ideas. It's a character-based film, it's a story, and I think it's a work that's not language-based, it's all visual. So Doug, I think we're ready to put up strings, and then we'll immediately go into the interview footage with the filmmakers.
But what I was doing in strings, in some parts of it, like there are parts where you see the whole apartment building or their whole apartment as a background. And you will see if a character is walking across the frame, the character is being repainted each time, like for every single movement, the whole character is being repainted, but the background is not. So, but you'll see the background kind of mush out because it's being destroyed and then reconstituted as the character passes in front of it.
So it leaves a little trail. It's like a sense of a trail behind it.
If you've seen the films of Caroline Leaf, she was the real pioneer of that technique. She did a lot of true metamorphosis where the entire frame is changing constantly. And so her images were even simpler. And she was just a master of it. She could kind of keep this all in her head of where she was going and where she was coming from. Because that's sort of the trick, is to always sort of have an idea of where you're going. And because you are literally destroying everything as you go. And if you make a mistake, there's nothing to do but keep going and hope that it's okay. And it's kind of forgiving in a way. You can, as long as you start somewhere that has integrity and you end up somewhere with integrity, you can get away with a lot of fudging in the middle. And it was kind of interesting because it's more like a performance, and you have to have the movement in your head. You have to kind of know, I think roughly this will take, I mean, I would never think, oh, I'm going to make her move from here to here in 12 frames. I would just kind of keep moving what I thought in my head it needed to be, but I didn't really think about it in numbers. It's sort of a muscle memory thing more.
Very, very concentrated work.
Yeah.
Under camera. You have to be, if you're moving any number of parts, you have to be focused. Like Wendy says, it's performance, and it's kind of beautiful for that, isn't it? It's
and it keeps you moving forward. And if
meditative.
you have perfectionistic tendencies, it keeps that in check, because you just, I think I screwed that up a little bit, but I'm just going to keep going. And I mean, I think now if I don't really have much desire to do that ever again, but if I did, with the digital thing, you could fix things. With camera, you can have video assist, where you can recall your previous frame and refer to that. And
Didn't you have video assist?
I did partway through. I got video assist. I didn't at the beginning, but that kind of revolutionized it. That was very helpful.
But it's very high stakes, especially when you're shooting on film. Where it's a valuable resource, and if you mess it up, you've messed up many feet of film. So that very high stakes, very concentrated process. You'd have to work really hard to recreate that kind of scenario in a digital world. I don't think you could do it, because it's just cheap to redo in this world.
I mean, like cutout animation or puppet animation is what we call straight ahead techniques. So they're not employing paper that is then shot under the camera, or paintings or whatever. It's anything that's performative, moving anything under the camera. And when it works, it's great. Like, when you see a puppet film that is real puppet compared to 3D CG, it's different. You do respond.
It has a little more life or something.
Yeah, and you also, I think, intuitively you understand the limitations of gravity and of sets, and of, when you see a Wes Anderson film like the Fantastic Mr. Fox, and so he's somebody, he could easily have made that film using CG, but his decision, I think, was a love of that kind of hokiness. And like, one thing I really loved about it is when you'd see smoke or something, and you knew that it was just cotton batting, kind of animated, going up in the air. And it's so charming. It's like going to the theater and what they can do with sets or something, because when you're sitting in the audience, this is a theater. There's no magic here. There's no computer tricks here. If somebody's flying, that there are ropes involved, or like it's sort of that kind of trickery, and that's thrilling. And whereas CG now, anything can be done, like literally, you can make anything look like anything if you had the money and the skill to do it. It's like, like they're saying, you don't
there's
need
something
actors
disappointing
anymore.
about that.
And it's lost its thrill in a certain way. I think it's that kind of hokiness that comes with real space, real gravity, real materials. This next one is co-directed by Wendy Tilby and Amanda Forbis, When the Day Breaks. Major work for them, and one that was so well received internationally, picking up many awards, I think, including an award at the Cannes Film Festival. Here, the central idea is a car crash. One character witnesses the death of another. Again, here, the filmmakers are working in 35 millimeter. So
working frame by frame. This is all pre-digital. The labor behind these films is really something to keep in mind when watching them. They create 12 frames per second to create the motion in this work and in strings. And that represents 720 images per minute, or in this case, with When the Day Breaks, which runs about 10 minutes, that's more than 7,000 images going into the making of this work. With When the Day Breaks, they used video underpinnings, and this relates back to Wendy Tilby's interest in documentary. They went out on the streets of Montreal, used a video camera, had their friends and they themselves dressed up in some costumes, but that gave them a baseline for creating the visual look of the film. They then selected key images, and in animation it's like using rotoscoping as a technique where you're drawing to create the image, and then the still images. So they experimented with many techniques, but using the thermal images that they outputted and then painting on those is the basis of this work. They also were using oil sticks to create the texture and colors of the film. And they joke about the shooting ratio, which was almost like documentary. But for an animator, you would almost try to have 1-to-1, that what you create is what we see in the end. In this case, and with these wonderful filmmakers, they take a lot of different paths and work in a kind of a non-linear, organic way, creatively. And I think the end results are amazing. So let's look at When the Day Breaks from 1994. Thanks.
Oh, when the day breaks in two and the sun comes slipping through, it's morning and I'm singing 'cause everything's beginning and skies are blue. When the day breaks and the moon makes his last goodbye, I rise and shine. The world is
prairie blue, where's the home I once knew? Clouds on high, rolling by, prairie blue, where the sweet grasses lie, 'neath the wide open sky, I can see endlessly, prairie blue. Why did I ever stray so very far away? I'll be coming back someday. Where are you, prairie blue? Are you missing me too? I'm at ease on the breeze, prairie, prairie blue.
I think that wildlife is essentially about civilization meeting wilderness and about adaptation or failure to adapt. That and a depiction of the Western landscape, which is underappreciated.
You know, I'd always been interested in remittance men, and I didn't know why. And then it's when you pull in these different interests from elsewhere that suddenly it starts to mean something. So you might just start with an image or a notion, something that is not even a full sentence idea, just a half a sentence. And then as you pull in other things, then it gets a body.
I like to create chaos and then find the order in it. But I really, really enjoy the chaotic part, which I think is has to be on a more subconscious level. Just let stuff filter in, and then you apply your conscious ordering mind to it and try to find the right ideas within the chaos that you have found. But otherwise, I think you don't get to the good stuff if you don't kind of turn the top part of your brain off, or front part or left part, whatever that is. All of it. Yeah.
Dear Mother and Father, happy news. I have secured for myself 90 acres of prime ranch land.
Well, when we first started Wildlife, we resolved that we were going to explore new techniques, and because we were becoming computer savvy, we thought we would take advantage of that and do something quick. And so we originally conceived the film to be fairly painterly in style because that's what we do. But we thought there must be some way we can create some shortcuts using the computer. And so we spent a good deal of time exploring various things for different parts of the film, and then decided that any of the digital options weren't nearly as good as paint, particularly for this film.
But ultimately, we just found that we like real media better. We just like it better. There's just something about the way it looks on the screen that is different and to our minds still more interesting.
We work on the computer for all of our animation, editing, compositing, even though the film is completely hand-painted. So what we have here this is the station master character, who's one of the people that we have interviewed. Well, first we recorded the voice of an actor according to a script that we had written, and the voice is imported into Flash, and then we just animate a character to match the voice. And so this is just done frame by frame in Flash, and I'll just play it for you.
Englishmen, they end up out here with a whole lot of dollars and no sense.
This is not how people usually use Flash.
Yeah.
That we don't use any of the interpolating features or even of the time-saving features. It's just hand-drawn on the computer.
So after the Station Master was animated, we print out every frame onto paper and then paint it. So the whole thing now, with the exception of one small part of it, which is more of documentary footage, live action, the whole thing is painted in gouache. And that means pretty much every single frame is fully painted.
Yeah, it's lovely.
With When the Day Breaks, everything was just painting the pictures and then shooting them under a 35 millimeter camera. And the immediacy of that was wonderful in the sense that you couldn't mess around with the images in the computer. Once it was on film, you either kept it or you had to redo it. Now with Photoshop, you can pick out all the bits of cat hair and the cookie crumbs and from all the artwork. You can fix something. If a eyeball looks weird, you fix it. And that's great, but it's also daunting. It opens up a whole new level of perfectionism that's dangerous. It's been interesting for us to have producers both in Montreal and in Alberta, and then also the fact that we're here in Calgary, but the office is actually in Edmonton, so we're not in close contact with any of our producers like on a daily basis. And they all know just how circuitous some of our paths are and how sometimes we go down dead ends and sometimes things work and sometimes they don't, and that we've taken a long time, but they completely get it and they completely understand and support that.
It's a lot better and a lot easier to make a good animated film with the film board. There aren't too many places in the world that do what they do. It's a pretty rare and precious thing.
Okay. Okay, let's down. Okay, roll over. Roll over.
Here at the dawn of the 20th century, young men from fine families all over this mighty island are crossing the seas for adventure in Canada. Armed with the pluck and decency that make this empire great, these young lions expect to make their fortunes in the colonies and shed light in the cultural darkness. Good luck, fellows!
A ranch, I think. Fancies himself a cowboy. Well, he can damn well make something of himself.
Dear Mother and Father, happy news. I have secured for myself 90 acres of prime ranch land, which to my delight has upon it an absolutely wizard ranch house. I'm writing this letter from my veranda, and I'm very pleased with my situation. I believe I may now call myself a rancher.
Oh, give me a ranch and a big pair of pants, and give me a Stetson too, and let me wahoo, wahoo, wahoo.
Englishmen, they end up out here with a whole lot of dollars and no sense.
They're wonderful dancers, but I certainly wouldn't marry one of them.
We put a sign in the window. No credit extended to Englishmen. It's our policy. They never pay their bill.
Give me the wide open spaces. I'm just like a prairie flower, growing wilder every hour. Oh, give me a moon, the prairie moon, and give me a gal that's true, and let me wahoo, wahoo, wahoo!
Circeum luticum, the common swamp thistle. Tell me, old chap, when a swallow snaps up a gnat, do you think God decided that that particular swallow should snap up that particular gnat at that particular instant? No, no. It's natural selection, I tell you. Survival of the fittest.
No, he's not a religious man. I fear he comes to church not to nourish his soul, but with the hopes of securing a nice lunch after the service.
Dear Father, I am making tremendous progress here on the ranch and now have my eye on a handsome herd of cattle. Might you wire me a little extra this month?
Oh, he be a nice boy. Very polite. He live 2 miles that way. He no like much working. Only to talk. I very worry for him. Winter, she is coming.
I fear I am lapsing into the wildlife of those around me. My hands are tanned, and I'm clean forgetting my manners. Before too long, I shall be as rough as a cowboy, or the wild wolf of the prairie. Dearest mother and father, it is unspeakably cold at present, and spring is no more than a thin promise. I must confess that things have become rather dreary here at the ranch. I might as well be on the moon for all the conversation to be had. How is everyone at home? As it is Sunday, I expect you're sitting down to roast beef. Would that I could join you. I should regale you all with tall tales of the Wild West. Kiss Mimsy and Aggie for me. I remain your loving son.
He was found on Wednesday morning. No evidence of foul play. Very peculiar circumstances.
Roundup is over. It's the cowboy's last ride. He'll sleep 'neath the stars on the prairie so wide. It's the end of the trail. He no more will roam. The coyotes are calling. It's time to go home. Odelay, 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 odelay. Odelay, 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 odelay.
And let me just take a moment to say a few words of appreciation for the works of Wendy Tilby and Amanda Forbis. I mean, they are truly talented filmmakers, auteurs in the field of animation. And I do think that their use of time, the idea of time in their works, and all of the things that go into the timing of frame-to-frame relationships and the compositional ways in which they work are extraordinary. The emotion in these films runs so deep, as I'm sure you just experienced with these three films. They're able to use animation in a way like distilling narratives into a more poetic form. And I think they're really talented at doing that. You know, it's rare that they're stretching out time, but in wildlife, they do that on the prairies. Sometimes we're just looking at the great expanse and the sense of horror behind that. But their pacing is critical to the quality of these films. And I think they've been really successful adapting to digital. Much of what we've just seen is hand-painted, handcrafted, frame by frame. They've just finished a new film that will premiere this spring. It's completely in the digital environment, but I know from speaking with them that they really take care in terms of texture. You know, they really understand how they can create a nuanced visual look using digital. And really, as filmmakers who are largely creating the imagery in their own court. Of course, they work with people on sound, and they work with musicians and with actors for voices in the films. But it really is a kind of a cottage industry at its heart. So now I want to say a few things about Janie Geiser. Janie Geiser is based in Los Angeles. She teaches at Cal Arts in the theater department, where she actually teaches puppetry and performance. She's a multidisciplinary artist who, when she was at the University of Georgia, she was initially studying French, but then she took a drawing class from an abstract expressionist painter, and it opened her eyes to, the field of artistic practice. She has done many things, from drawing and illustration, and then also working in the field of avant-garde puppetry and performance. And then for the last 25 plus years, she's been working as well in the area of film. So that allows her to do work in a kind of a solitary manner, I wanted to share one film with you, The Red Book, made in 1994. This is a work she made on 16 millimeter format. It's a small gauge, and it's it's a painted work that uses cutout animation. Her work is quite abstract and very poetic in its own right. This work has a sense of a character and a through line around a cutout animated or form. But a lot of her more recent work is really truly abstract, dealing with kind of animating objects and referring to global situations. If she's concerned with gun violence or the environment, she includes that type of emotional response to the world in a non-didactic way. Her films are dense and complex. They require multiple viewings, which is lovely. And I think that we all have our own readings of them. So I'd like to show The Red Book and then have a little clip of a recent interview I did with Janie in November. And then we can bring up the house lights at the end for any questions you may have. So let's go into The Red Book. Can you talk a little bit and share some ideas about how you're making your films? I mean, we could speak about one in particular or just generally. I understand, you're working and animating on a tabletop.
Yeah, I have a camera on a tripod, and I'm usually standing, and just have a table with, a sort of central area that it's like the stage that things come in and out of, and often just things are within my reach, that I pull into the frame. And then just two small, like, desk lamps, mostly, that I'm using. And maybe I'll be using one, maybe both. Often I'll cover one with a gel, or I use what I call to myself anyway, interrupters, things that I can put between the camera and the image, or in front of the lights to sort of modulate what you see also, like cut off part of the frame, cut off areas of the frame, or change the lighting. But it's all very extremely low tech.
And to what degree are you conceiving the entire work in kind of a conceptual way at the outset, or do some of the works just take the form as you make them and you determine that along the way?
Pretty much the second, yeah. I start out with a terrain, usually with a starting place, either through image or sound or an idea. And then I gather things around that, objects and photographs and, just kind of whatever sort of makes sense to work with. And then I just start. And so there is a kind of assembling under the camera of compositions and then activating those compositions. I worked for quite a while on this film, The Red Book, which drew on my whole background in illustration and painting, so everything was kind of painted cutouts and mixed in with some collage materials, but a much more painted films than my current films are. And so that just sort of hit for me in terms of, okay, this is sort of the way I can make film that's true to the rest of my practice, and I can do it by myself. I don't need a lot of other people involved. And so that's a kind of long-winded evolutionary story.
So it is amazing that over the course of your entire career that you've been keeping these parallel involvements going. I mean, you've been animating films for more than 25 years, and I believe your activity around puppetry and performance has been
much more like from the mid '80s, So yeah, I mean the performance, I really haven't done much in the last couple of years because of the pandemic, but they just require and draw on different parts of my interests. So the filmmaking is very solitary. It's actually back to like painting. Not that I'm painting in the films, but I get to just work on my own, and it's very improvisational and very immediate, even though then the editing and the post is another whole level. But with the performance, I have to kind of plan much more. I have to get people involved in rehearsals. I collaborate with musicians and composers and designers. So it's a kind of bigger activity. So I like both.
Amazing. And then, as mentioned, you are teaching and at the graduate level at CalArts?
Mostly, yeah.
Mostly graduate, yeah. And
that's, that's something that happened. The CalArts started a puppetry program. That's kind of how I got brought there. And the students are really interdisciplinary. They come from all different areas of the school, and it's sort of broader than you might think of as puppetry. There's a great term that's arisen about sort of puppet performance that's called material performance, which I think is sort of truer to my own interests, which is animating the material world in whatever way that might mean. And so a lot of visual artists, use objects and do performance. And so kind of drawing on all of those pools of students, a lot happens. And it's very inspiring to me what they do with it.
How do you think about animation in relationship to the other arts that you're involved with? Is it fluid for you, or is it very... do you keep the disciplines more separate?
I think it's all the same thing for me. I'm involved with the same sort of sets of ideas, and it's more like what form is the best form. And for me, animation is a technique to use to make films. Animation, I know there's sort of a form called animation, that there's animation festivals, and I don't quite understand that difference, but and sometimes I present my work in those festivals, but I think of it more as a tool than as a form, and I think the forms that I'm working with are drawn more from experimental film, so it's a kind of merger of those things, and that lines up with what I'm doing in performance and other realms. Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to say to the students in Humanities 20, I'm going to send Lisa Wymore the three interviews that relate to the animation series will be shared with you if you want to look at them. The interviews with the artists are lengthy, more than what we saw today. So, and then for members of the general public, these programs are up on our website, the BAMPFA website, until March 13th, so about another week and a couple days. And you can find more works by these artists and a program related to Lawrence Jordan and Joseph Cornell on the website. So, Lisa.
Yeah, so we're just going to take the last couple minutes if anyone has any questions to ask of Susan and her interviews with these incredible artists. And yeah.
I think we just have to
wait for the mic. Hang on, we're going to wait for the mic because we're recording today.
Yeah.
No worries.
I'm just curious about your own personal journey in relation to animation and
I studied filmmaking, film studies and filmmaking, and I worked as an independent filmmaker for 3 years before I got involved with independent film distribution and then ultimately film curation for about the last 25 years. So, yeah, I am very much at heart a filmmaker when I'm thinking about cinema. And when I'm thinking about the types of programs that we present at BAMPFA for the public. It's been a very long time since I worked in film, but I think it's very essential to me in terms of the joy that I have in terms of presenting works by artist filmmakers and thinking about cinema and how it's really made and why works that are really great, why it is they are formally put together and also at the thematic level too. And I have such a broad interest in cinema. It ranges. We show some animation at BAMPFA, but it's not like we could show a lot more perhaps. But we actually show such a broad spectrum of cinema here that's good. Thanks for the question.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll go here and then we'll take two before we close.
Hi. So, often in Hollywood cinema attempts to make us unaware of editing in films through continuity editing, but in Tilby and Forbis's interview, they mentioned that, there's something more whimsical and about frame by frame filmmaking and how it actually draws attention to their editing. So how does this kind of add to the experience of viewing for the audiences? And do these filmmakers themselves have a sort of desired reception?
Oh, I think they do. And I think these filmmakers that we've looked at today, they're constantly showing their films to audiences, often in person. Although I would say Wendy Tilby and Amanda Forbis, their work, because it's made with the National Film Board of Canada and the support, they actually are on a digital platform through the National Film Board of Canada. So they have a much wider reach than one could possibly imagine. But as artists, yes, they are very attuned to how their films are received by audience members, and I think that's central to them. And you can see how different the styles are. Tilby and Forbis coming from story-based animation, Janie Geiser from an artistic approach, more avant-garde, experimental. But I think that I really admire the artistry behind the works, and think that given that they spend years, well, Janie Geiser works more quickly, but Tilby Forbis spend years working on their films, and they really, I think, get it down to the frame, perfection down to the frame.
I think we're going to do one last question.
Yes, in Strings, I don't remember any storyboarding or notes. Did you make that up as you went along?
I think when I asked that question of Wendy Tilby, she starts with a kernel, and that kernel could be an image or some ideas, and then she weaves outwards. She described it like being like a pearl, kind of building around a core. And there's a lot of freedom in her approach. I do think because she was working on film, she tried to think through things that would work, and I think that painting on glass is such a constraining factor. She mentioned if you screw something up, you have to accept it in a way. But I think that she has this way of thinking on multiple levels and keeping it all in her mind as she creates. It's extraordinary. I don't think there was a full storyboard, and they said that they don't do complete script. They don't write scripts for their films.
Well, I want to thank Susan for this incredible program today.